Becoming your true self might sound like the plotline of a quirky Hollywood drama, but the psychology behind it is more profound than a late-night talk show monologue. Today, we're diving into the fascinating mind of Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist who believed that understanding the hidden depths of the psyche could set us free. Before we know it, we'll be exploring concepts that challenge our assumptions, spark a few laughs, and hopefully ignite some inner growth. Carl Gustav Jung was born in 1875, and by the early 20th century, he had already begun shaking up the foundations of psychology. He started out as one of Sigmund Freud's closest collaborators. At one point, people actually thought Jung would carry on Freud's legacy. That didn't quite work out. They had a falling out that makes today's celebrity feuds look tame. The fundamental rift was that while Freud insisted on a rather narrow set of root causes, largely centered on sexuality, Jung dared to color outside the lines. He looked outside personal trauma and dared to imagine a deeper, collective well of experience. This was radical. It was psychology, but spiced up with a sense of universal myth and shared ancestry. Jung didn't just want to understand mental illness or psychological hiccups. He wanted to figure out how to help people become more genuinely themselves. He saw the psyche as layered. It wasn't just about handling our day-to-day issues and calling it quits. Instead, he believed we each possess huge reservoirs of unconscious material that shape who we are. He claimed that at the bottom of our minds lay not just forgotten memories or suppressed impulses, but a collective unconscious. A kind of communal storehouse of archetypes, universal symbols and patterns that appear in myths, dreams, and art across cultures. It was as if humanity were plugged into one giant, ancient psychological Wi-Fi network. Controversial? Absolutely, but that's what makes it so interesting. To many of his contemporaries, Jung's thinking was as outlandish as someone trying to explain quantum mechanics in a backyard barbecue. Yet, as the decades passed, his influence on fields from therapy to literature to even New Age spirituality became undeniable. Middle-aged Americans today might recognize Jungian themes in movies, best-selling novels, or those random motivational posters featuring a lone figure climbing a mountain. It's no coincidence. Jung's ideas have seeped into the cultural bloodstream, making them a quiet force that shapes how we think about life's big questions. Imagine you're not just a product of your upbringing or your one-of-a-kind experiences, but also an heir to a vast psychological legacy that transcends time and space. Jung's notion of the collective unconscious posits that you carry within your psyche a blueprint of humanity's recurring motifs. It's like inheriting a family home filled with strange, antique furniture and dusty portraits of distant ancestors that you've never met, yet who somehow influence the way you move through the rooms. The collective unconscious brims with archetypes, primordial images that show up in myths across the globe. The hero, the mother, the wise old man, the trickster, these characters and symbols dance through folklore in every culture. Look closely at your favorite Hollywood blockbuster and you'll find these timeless patterns. The hero's journey, popularized by Joseph Campbell but inspired by Jung, shows up from Star Wars to The Matrix. It's no accident. The psychic wiring that guided ancient shamans and medieval storytellers still whispers in our ears today. That's pretty wild when you think about it. What's even more intriguing is that Jung didn't see these archetypes as static. He thought they evolved, along with cultures and individuals. He was fascinated by how images from alchemy, Gnosticism, and Eastern philosophy kept cropping up in modern dreams, as if guided by some ancient cosmic algorithm. That didn't always sit well with the strictly rational thinkers of his time. They sometimes dismissed Jung's spiritual leanings as mysticism, masquerading as psychology. Yet, today, as meditation apps and interest in Eastern thought flourish, Jung's openness to spirituality looks rather ahead of its time. One lesser-known tidbit is that Jung worked with Nobel Prize-winning physicist Wolfgang Pauli on the concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that defy normal cause-and-effect logic. Synchronicity might sound like a stoned college freshman's dorm room theory at first, but it's serious stuff in Jungian circles. Imagine dreaming of a scarab beetle, and the next day, a literal beetle bangs against your window pane at the exact moment you're discussing a personal breakthrough in therapy. Jung said this kind of event is no accident. It's evidence that psyche and matter might be linked in mysterious ways. To skeptics, this reeks of pseudoscience, but to others, it's a sign that reality is far stranger and richer than we typically admit. Before we move on to the next one on this list, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It costs you nothing but makes a huge difference to us. Thanks to all of you who do. Individuation is Jung's central idea for becoming who you truly are. It's the process of integrating all these layers: persona, anima, animus, shadow, and archetypal influences into a well-rounded, authentic individual. Jung believed you're not fully you until you embark on this path. Imagine it as a road trip into the depth of your psyche. You start as someone following the scripts handed down by parents, teachers, and society, and over time you realize you've got baggage that isn't yours and start unpacking it. Individuation is like a slow, careful repacking of your mental suitcase, discarding what no longer serves you and making room for newfound understanding. The goal is psychological wholeness, not perfection, but a state where you accept yourself, quirks, flaws, and all, and feel at home in your own skin. Jung said symbols and dreams often guide you along this journey. Maybe you keep dreaming of a labyrinth, hinting that you're lost in your own complexity. Another person might dream of forging a sword, symbolizing the forging of identity. Individuation is not a weekend retreat. It's a lifelong endeavor. It's also not for the faint of heart. After all, who wants to see their uglier aspects? But Jung insisted that real growth involves confronting the parts of ourselves we'd rather hide. Only by doing that can we move beyond the superficial and step into genuine adulthood. For a middle-aged American who's been through the ringer, careers, relationships, paying taxes, Jung's idea can resonate deeply. Midlife crises, after all, might be nature's invitation to get real about who you are and what you actually want. Let's wade into murkier waters. Jung's reputation isn't all halo and enlightenment. He had controversial moments that modern audiences might find troubling. For one, he was initially involved with the International General Medical Society for Psychotherapy, which had ties to the Nazis in the 1930s, though Jung's defenders say he was trying to keep psychoanalysis alive under a dangerous regime and that he opposed Nazi ideology. Critics claim he should have taken a firmer stand. This historical blemish doesn't erase his contributions, but it does remind us that great thinkers can have questionable choices, especially under political pressure. It's like discovering your kindly grandfather once made some seriously questionable decisions. Jung's work also blended psychology with spirituality, magic, and even alchemy. He spent years poring over ancient texts and mystical traditions. In his famous Red Book, a secret manuscript published posthumously, he recorded vivid dreams and visions, filled with elaborate illustrations and cryptic dialogues. It reads like something between a medieval grimoire and a psychedelic journal. People thought this was downright weird when it came out. Imagine being a respected psychiatrist, yet also dabbling in esoteric symbolism. It didn't win him the Coolest Scientist of the Year award among the buttoned-up academics of his day, but now, as interest in spirituality without dogma grows, Jung's Red Book and his mystical side seem oddly prescient. He also faced criticism for his perceived essentialism. Some modern thinkers argue that Jung's archetypes risk oversimplifying cultural differences and nuances in human behavior. Others believe he paved the way for a more inclusive understanding of the psyche. Controversy, after all, keeps intellectual thought alive. If everyone agreed on Jung's ideas, we'd have turned them into a stale dogma by now. Instead, they remain vibrant, debated, adapted, and sometimes ridiculed. This tension is precisely why Jung continues to captivate. He's not just some old guy in a dusty textbook. He's a complex figure whose legacy still raises eyebrows. Another lesser-known fact is that Jung's interests spanned far beyond the therapy couch. He built a tower at Bollingen, a stone retreat at Lake Zurich, where he'd escape the modern world and get lost in thought. He collaborated with artists, explored UFO phenomena late in life, and argued that modern humans risked losing their souls in an overly materialistic society. He seemed to foresee many cultural shifts, the thirst for meaning, the hunger for something beyond consumerism. His critics roll their eyes, but his fans say he was tuned into frequencies the rest of us barely register. So what does all of this have to do with living your life today in suburban America or beyond? Quite a bit, actually. Sure, you might not discuss the anima and animus at your next PTA meeting, but Jung's ideas have influenced therapy practices across the country. Even if your therapist doesn't call themselves Jungian, many therapeutic approaches borrow from his insights. The emphasis on understanding your dreams, your unconscious motivations, and the symbolic patterns in your life owe a tip of the hat to old Carl Jung. Pop culture is soaked in Jungian concepts, from the archetypal superhero stories that flood movie theaters to the personality tests people love to take online. Jung's fingerprints are everywhere. When you see someone talk about their shadow work on social media, they may have no idea they're invoking Jung's notion of integrating unconscious, hidden parts of the psyche. The language of modern self-help often echoes his themes: finding yourself, accepting your whole being, and recognizing recurring patterns that limit your growth. There's also a trend of spirituality and mindfulness that resonates with Jung's perspective. While he wasn't prescribing yoga retreats or mindfulness apps, his openness to Eastern philosophies, mythological traditions, and spiritual dimensions of the psyche make him feel oddly relevant in a time when people want something beyond the daily grind. Jung suggests that underneath our cultural differences, human beings share a deep symbolic grammar that helps us make sense of life. It offers a broader perspective that can help middle-aged Americans reframe their struggles. Feeling lost at midlife? Maybe you're just in the middle of your own hero's journey, forging a more authentic self from the raw material of your disappointments and aspirations. Jung's work invites us not to label ourselves too quickly nor to live on autopilot. Instead, it encourages self-exploration that's as adventurous as traveling to a foreign country. In an age where we outsource our thinking to smartphones, Jung's call to know ourselves on a deeper level is like a refreshing, if occasionally bizarre, tonic. Jokes aside, the mere act of asking what's really going on inside me can open doors to greater fulfillment, creativity, and yes, maybe a laugh at your own expense when you realize just how weirdly patterned your psyche truly is. As we wrap up, consider that Carl Jung's work may challenge your comfort zones. It might feel like you've been invited to a secret library hidden inside your own mind, stocked with dusty tomes on human nature. Yet it's precisely this depth that makes Jung's ideas so compelling. Understanding the collective unconscious, facing the shadow, and embracing individuation isn't just intellectual fluff. It's a path toward a richer, more authentic life. Hope you found this video helpful. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't be shy, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts, and continue exploring who you really are.